This is a very odd sector of the galaxy, I mused, engaging the confidentiality latches on the communication crate containing the payload of our latest client. Don't forget that we expect the remainder of the payment within 4 cycles. I stated this as neutrally as I could muster without sounding cold. My partner has spent no end of effort teaching me to manipulate my outward emotions to leave a better impact on our clients, but I still slipped up sometimes. Yes, this is a small price for my needs. You'll have your payment before you even complete the request. You're lucky I've seen and heard good things about your services, responded our client. Make no mistake, it will be fulfilled, I grandly replied, as the client exited our ship. I hit the confusingly labelled Opening Close button on the interior bulkhead, only slightly clarified by its immediate presence to a button labelled Opening Open, before proceeding to initiate the ship's startup sequences. The now departing client was more affluent than usual, and had just finished mediating a negotiation between 2 not insignificant Rimwood power blocks. We had been hired for the prestigious purpose of returning the now signed physical agreement back to the nearest branch of the Stellar Claims Department, some 1,000 light-years forward. This is, despite a digitized copy, no doubt already arriving via the faster-than-light tachyon communication system, before I was even handed the one now locked away in the communication crate behind me. Although they hold more credibility, keeping a hard copy is a bit of an antiquated tradition from mostly forgotten times. But traditions pay well, and compared to our regular courier jobs, this one is simple. Maybe it's not the most exciting request, but excitement in space normally means injury, death, or worse. And with the diversity of some of the stories derived from harrowing experiences out in the black, I don't even want to know what worse could represent. No, I think we'll stick to our slow-going, well-paying, somewhat unimportant task of babysitting a sheet of pressed flora and dye, contained in a glorified safe, as an automated navigation system chauffeurs our ship through a network of optimal subspace tunnels. Now, back to my musing. Our client issued us with a peculiar caveat to their request. Prior to picking up our payload, we were to participate in the lavish celebration occurring outside of the deliberation chambers, between the remainder of the 2 Rimwood delegations. I think the intention behind this was to use my partner and I as a test to see how the Rimwood sentients would get along with those from closer to the galactic core. Either that, or our client was already aware of the borderline poison that these sentients consume, and needed an excuse for a food taster. You see, not fully participating in local culinary tradition is one of the first no-nos taught to any stellar diplomat, assuming they don't have the means or patience to produce a dietary feasibility study tailored to their specific species, in response to the slightest offhand comment. In the end, the food didn't kill us, although my partner chose to enter an early repose. I wasn't sure if they were fatigued from their physical actions performed at this celebration, or rather that the preliminary edibility scanner missed a more noxious ingredient served amongst the relative chaos of the evening. I'm pretty sure I saw them eating one of those red speckled dishes, and when I ate some, it nearly took me out of action. So I was hoping it would be the former. Repose normally lasts for several cycles, so I would only be able to find out near the end of our travels. Judging by the food and atmosphere, both figuratively and literally, it seemed like the 2 delegations had a decent level of compatibility. On top of this, groups of sentients from either party regularly mingled with each other throughout the celebration. The circumstances for this treaty must have been positive, or at least amicable. My previous impression of other similar events that I had had the misfortune to drop by ranged from the sentients coming across as mutually icy, or even downright bloodthirsty. You could have cut the tension with a laser utensil, and that would result in far more than a single slice. After doing my best to fulfill our client's caveat, without ingesting my last meal, and only experiencing a handful of cultural misinterpretations throughout the event, the doors to the deliberation room swung open, and our client sauntered out in front of those emerging from within. Our client easily spotted me amongst the crowd and signaled for me to follow. Ensuring they had a signed and sealed treaty in hand, I strode to their side and was escorted back towards the shipyard. Seems as though the negotiation went well, I probed. miming utmost caution as I transferred the treaty to the communication crate inside our ship's primary bay. They always liked it when I implied a heightened value to their package. I did request your services before the treaty was even composed. When I'm mediating, a successful negotiation is all but guaranteed. They postured, their self-importance more tangible than the meta-alloy clasps I had just engaged within the communication crate. With my guiding hand, even the most feral sentience can be brought under the watchful guise of the core worlds. Yes, the humans and Glorian do unofficially have a nearly familial relationship, but their respective governing powers harbour some animosity for their neighbour over border friction. Although this is to be expected when the star density out here is so low. I briefly acknowledged their statement while preparing the final layers of protection for the treaty. Judging by your current level of cognizance, you managed with their cuisine? The client asked, confirming my second earlier suspicion. Oh, the stuff with red specks in it is to die for, I replied, knowing full well I was forfeiting any chance at a tip, and likely any future requests from this client. Also, don't drink any liquids they offer you. The scanner didn't pick up on it, but they are by far the biggest obstacle in future culinary integration. Maybe my lessons were paying off more than I thought. I was quite proud of the degree to which I had just suppressed my vengeful malice. The beverages were the only thing that saved me from that vile red spice earlier in the night. Forget no tip, I might be making another enemy with this childish slice of revenge. I see. I'll have to keep that in mind for the remainder of the celebration, the client said, gazing off back out of the ship's primary bay. I continue my bluff. I know, it's a strange thing to consider. Normally beverages have the highest degree of dietary compatibility, but that apparently isn't the case here. This is a very odd sector of the galaxy, I mused. With the ship's startup sequences complete, I did a quick check to ensure my partner was in fact on board, before handing control over to the automated navigation system. I could fly the thing myself, but it had been a long cycle, and to maintain our vigilance, I wouldn't be able to repose until my partner had completed theirs. It would be better to relax and conserve myself for now. The flight to the nearest subspace node would be one of the 2 longest thrust-bound segments of the trip. Once in the subspace network, the majority of the time would be spent recharging the latching drive at each node, rhythmically interspersed with short-duration jumps through each tunnel, before further recharging. Our little ship was a small but fast one. Out here, with far longer distances between the stars compared to at the core, it could charge its drive in less than a tenth of a cycle. This did come at significant expense and energy consumption, but that cost is essentially just passed on to our clients. After all, that's the price of a fast and reliable courier. The Subspace network has been around for a very long time. Of course, not to the current quantity, quality, or usability, but over time different members of the galaxy have upgraded, stabilized, expanded, and in more than a few cases even destroyed parts of the network. After all, subspace traversal is a pretty simple concept. Catalyze your local network node's disturbance to break through the space-subspace membrane, ensure you are pointing roughly in the direction of an existing tunnel, initiate your latching drive so your ship can utilize the ambient field to propel itself down the tunnel, while simply avoiding touching the sides or your ship will end up dampened in the tunnel wall. You don't want that to happen, unless you have some damn powerful inertial dampeners, otherwise you will end up splattered along the inside of your ship's wall. I guess my simple view of the subspace network ignores a lot of the mechanics, science, and trial and error that came before. Heck, you even see some wrecks mostly composed of the old test ships still lost to subspace every now and then. Either they were too unimportant, costly, or impractical to retrieve from the tunnel walls. It takes far too much energy to carve into solid regions of subspace, so unless you have a bore drive and enough power to fuel several colonies, using the existing tunnels is the best bet. Plus, the vast majority have been conveniently recorded as potential paths, allowing an up-to-date automated navigation system to guide you with optimal speed and safety. I was sitting in my repose room above the cockpit, darkened to allow my vision to take in the view outside the forward window, when a brief burst of light appeared in front of the ship. Green this time. Must be a thicker membrane here, I murmured to myself. The latching drive must have just finished its 6th recharge. 7th, maybe? The local nose continuous disturbance of the subspace membrane occasionally emits a photon or two as the membrane micro-tears and reknits itself, meaning you can notice a slight shimmer if you pay enough attention. Surprisingly, it doesn't take much energy for the node to maintain this state. However, a latching drive takes quite a bit to catalyze this disturbance into a full-blown tear. As a byproduct, there is a significant amount of photon emission of wavelengths corresponding to a number of local factors, but to most, the only important factor is just the thickness of the subspace membrane at the site of the tear. I don't think anyone cares enough to correct others on this assumption, when the variance caused by other factors is so minimal. Although, thinking back, somebody like that did attend the same classes as I did during my education, much closer to the galactic core, but that's beside the point. Shortly after catalyzing the disturbance, the drive latches onto the field emitted by the walls of the subspace tunnel. You could traverse a tunnel with conventional thrusters, but solid subspace doesn't play well with errant particles of matter and energy. I didn't take the class in advanced subspace mechanics, so I can't really explain why this is the case, nor can I explain why entire ships seem, for the most part, to remain intact for eons when embedded, instead of being atomized and flung around the tunnel, perforating anything present within. Anyway, the point is that higher wavelength light means a thicker than average membrane. Usually you see yellow or red, and traversal of a subspace tunnel is achieved when a latching drive performs a simple field manipulation to propel the craft housing it down the tunnel. As our ship entered the green-tinged tear, I once again focused on the mesmerizing wall of solid subspace. It didn't move, but the angle at which you viewed it significantly changed what you saw, turning the wall into a kaleidoscope of distorted colors and images. I would describe viewing it as speed cloud watching under the influence of a strong hallucinogen, when you are somehow always aware of the border of the tube you are traveling down. Which is why I noticed the change in the normally uniform cylindrical tunnel, as simultaneously the ship bobbed slightly in momentary turbulence. Turbulence in a subspace tunnel. This is a vacuum. It can only occur due to a perturbation in the subspace field. The split second of deviance in tunnel shape I witnessed appeared to be rough-hewn compared to any standard network tunnel. I scrambled up to the nearest terminal to replay the visual logs recorded moments ago. There it was. A still frame perfectly capturing a small unnetworked tunnel, poorly smoothed and receding off into subspace. Subspace tunnels don't intersect, I said aloud with confusion. Even at the core, where star density and therefore node density is so much higher, subspace tunnels are drilled with careful planning to ensure they don't cross. Any major change in tunnel geometry can cause a disruption to the latching field. This, of course, has too high a potential to crash a traversing ship, not to mention the chance of accidentally getting diverted down another tunnel due to overlapping subspace fields. You can't exactly control a latching drive beyond its one-dimensional direction. It just travels along the central axis of the tunnel, almost like a stellar zipline. Several possibilities started racing through my mind. Maybe there is some kind of giant worm creature that resides in this region of subspace. Or a bore drive malfunctioned, neglected from being so far rimward from any service yards. It can't be piracy, can it? The energy costs to maintain an active bore drive would far outweigh any potential profits gained from utilizing such an advantage in navigability. And the jumps are such short duration, the time frame within which you could intercept a conventional latching drive traversing ship is not feasible. Nothing seemed to fit in place. I began a net search tailored to the information regarding the crew's subspace tunnel from earlier. Simultaneously, I started to filter through all available data streams in the ship's overview, isolating anything anomalous. A significant heat source in a lower compartment? No, that's just my partner in repose. An error in a servo located within one of the docking clamps? Nope, that's been a problem for some time now. Its impact on docking is superficial anyway. A low resonating thrum throughout the ship? Just the sound of the thrusters acting... Wait. The thrusters shouldn't be active in the tunnel, and if they were, I would likely be feeling the consequences. I brought up the status of the thrusters on the terminal, and sure enough, they were on standby. Upon further analysis of the thrum, it seemed to be originating in the latching drive. Something must be causing an internal resonation within the field. Damn, I really should have taken that class on advanced subspace mechanics. Before I could lament further, I noticed the familiar approaching ring of shimmering light, this time lime green, framing the comforting star-speckled darkness beyond. Moments later, I got a ping notification from the active net search. It was seen that the confines of the tunnel had indeed limited the transfer of information enough, so that only when approaching the membrane did enough data transfer occur to significantly progress my search. The search revealed a few hits of other crew anecdotally experiencing similar occurrences. They were mostly reported in this stellar neighborhood too. Most of the posts had almost no further conversation though, just one or two suggestions of rimwood sentience, testing their core drives and the like. I guess it makes sense if they want to further expand the network, as it's unlikely those normally responsible for doing so coreward would bother coming out so far. The gentle tilt caused by the remaining acceptable levels of inertia left by the impulse dampeners told me we were out of the subspace tunnel and decelerating. Checking on the ship overview, I confirmed the latching drive was no longer propagating a from the odd field resonation experienced earlier. Just in case, I started a quick functionality check that should complete before the next jump, and went back to my search. I altered its parameters to look for occurrences similar to the latching drive from. This time, the search took significantly longer. Not every subnet has a near-instant connection galaxy-wide, and this topic of inquiry was certainly niche. The search eventually indicated it was completed with another ping. Only one result? I said skeptically. It seemed like it was a chain of declassified military logs, listed under some small local Rimwood Empire subnet from a few decades ago. That's pretty recent, so I should get some decently accurate information. I opened it up and set the translation algorithm to descriptive. Citizen identification 2-14-6-97527. Occupation of recording citizen. Military. Lesser General. Position. Admiral of 4th Reserve Fleet. Imperial date 1309 62-912. 43rd. Period of time of approximately 1.04904 cycles of war with sentient 39. Log. We are currently in orbit of the second planet of the, name translates roughly as Guide of the Outcast system. As one of the closest Empire control systems to the domain of sentient 39, we have to maintain vigilance in this war. Even with our offensive fleets encroaching on their systems, Sentient 39 has proven to have great tactical prowess in past skirmishes. I can only hope that the swiftness of our assault, and the asymmetrical presence and imperial control of active subspace network nodes, will provide us with enough of an advantage to overwhelm their military. Their worlds don't seem to have much in the way of unified militarization, so subsequent assimilation into the Empire should proceed smoothly and swiftly. Unfortunately, this hope is fading, as we are receiving multiple reports of anomalistic interference with the crude variant of a latching drive of our intersystem patrol ships. As of the latest reports, the impact is superficial and only giving the engineering teams a headache, both due to the resulting resonance with their auditory appendages, and their struggle to isolate the origin of such interference. We can only posit that this interference is a strange form of sonic warfare employed by Sentient 39. For now, we are being tasked to voluntarily enter the subspace network to gather more data on this interference. End log. Imperial date 1309-62-914. 45th. Approximately 1.04904 cycles of war with Sentient 39. Log. Some of the patrol ships have failed to perform their mandatory period of time of approximately 0.13113 cycles, the status update. We are being tasked with investigating the last known location and their planned secondary destination. These are two systems only 4 jumps away, so it will only be a little more than approximately 1.04904 cycles before we reach them. In the interim, our own experiences with Sentient 39's sonic weaponry has been confusing yet fruitful. Initially, we were analyzing the resonation in an attempt to locate the source, as this would provide us with the locations of Sentient 39, or at least their weaponry. It seems, however, that the resonation propagates uniformly throughout the field in a subspace tunnel, and in general has been trending towards higher amplitude the longer we investigate. My reading of the logs was interrupted by another lime-green flash of light, and the gentle tug of inertia as the ship proceeded onwards into the next subspace tunnel. Upon entering the rift, I couldn't help but think about this so-called sonic weaponry of Sentient 39. I think my paranoia is getting the better of me. I swear I can hear the interference myself at audible levels. I checked the results of the functionality check on the latching drive. All green. Trying to shake off my unease, I returned back to the logs. We have attempted to triangulate the source of the interference by comparing resonance amplitude amongst my fleet after distributing their ships throughout the nearby subspace network. Either our algorithm is off, there are multiple sources of the interference, or the origin is moving far faster than even our fastest ship can move through the subspace network. On top of this, my head engineer has demanded full modification rights to dampen the latching drive's oscillation, or else is threatening self-termination. Having visited engineering during a jump, I can only agree to her wishes. I can hear the resonance even in my quarters, but it's torture within such proximity of the latching drive. Considering the impact of Sentient 39 sonic weaponry on the morale of my crew, I can see its purpose and efficacy. However, if we had a better algorithm, we may be able to track the source, thereby locating its broadcasting origin, and Sentient 39's installation along with it. My head engineer insists she can isolate and eliminate the interference's influence on the rest of the ship, while still being able to measure it within the latching drive. I just can't shake the feeling that we're missing something here. Sentient 39 wouldn't utilize such flawed technology. I fear that our investigation of the missing patrol ships will reveal the true purpose of the interference. End log. Imperial date 1309-62-10-1. 46th, approximately 1.04904 cycles of war with Sentient 39. Log. It happened so fast. We were investigating the subspace tunnel between the last two suspected systems, within which the patrol ships disappeared. We had our latching drive field manipulation scaled down to a quarter of its efficiency, so we could remain in transit for as long as possible to look for any wrecks embedded in the walls. Internal diagnostics were showing no trace of Sentient 39 sonic attacks. Out of nowhere, the entire ship lurched to the side, tossing me and my crew with enough force to fatally wound some of them. When my second-in-command broke through his daze and studied the sensor readout, he exclaimed and put through a visualization of the surrounding tunnel geometry. The tunnel had somehow stopped short of the opposing system's subspace membrane, and opened up into what I can only describe as a huge cavernous tube, almost perpendicular to our original direction. The field emitted by this tube must have been far stronger than that of our original tunnel, as our latching drive, although greatly taxed and barely functional after such an extreme event, was still keeping us suspended in the center of the tube. The slight deviance from true perpendicularity maintained a small amount of momentum for my ship. This resulted in a slow drift down the cavernous tube, away from the tunnel we had just been within. The sensors also showed a difference in composition on the far side of the tube, near the continuation of the original tunnel we were within. It seemed to be a tangled mass of wrecks embedded in the wall. Realizing with horror the fate of our patrol ships, and that another 3 ships from my fleet were soon to follow us into this death trap, I tasked my communications officer with relaying a message back down the tunnel with urgency. She was unconscious. I scrambled over to her panel and put together an emergency signal. Maximum emergency. Subspace anomaly ahead. Disable latching drive until passed, and return to control with report. The signal went out, distorted echoes and amplifications of it rebounding off the surfaces of solid subspace and interfering with our own sensors. I could only hope that enough of the original message remains intact for the approaching ships. I turned my view back to the visualization, now punctuated by sporadic bursts of high-energy radiation, the amplified remnants of my signal, which shortly died off again. From the tunnel that we originally came from emerged the first of the 3 ships. I watched in horror as it lurched towards the center of the tube we were slowly floating down, only for it to snap forwards, latching drive clearly having failed, and careen into the pile of wrecks on the far side of the tube. Our sensors experienced another crescendoing burst of radiation, likely the smaller particle remnants of the crash that we had just watched, amplified and rebounded by the solid subspace surrounding. A medic tried to tend to me, but I pushed him off and directed him to my unconscious communications officer before returning to the sensor visualization, watching with apprehension. Thankfully, both of the remaining ships must have deciphered the message, as they passed through the tube unaffected by the pull of the superior field running through it, and coasted back into the original tunnel on the far side of the tube. We have been floating for over 2, approximately 0.13113 cycles now. Our wounded have been tended to as best as we can manage. Our dead moved to cold storage. I have no idea if this anomaly correlates with the sonic weaponry of Sentient 39, but we have recent nominal records of the Subspace tunnel we just tried to use between GSID number 3, 1793 19087, and GSID number 3, 1795 190837. This huge tunnel is recent and seems to have no end in sight, but irrespective of our fate, I'm glad some of my fleet will be able to warn the rest and return to the safety of our space for the time being. End log. I hadn't even noticed it, but the ship had already completed its latest jump and I was back in the vast open black. Those galactic system identification numbers at the end of that log are familiar. This is the third arm, and the 1795th region along it, but I don't keep myself constantly informed of the cluster and system that I am currently within. Looking to the status of the automated navigation system, I can see we just jumped from GSID number 3, 1795 190912 into GSID number 3, 1795 19087. Shit. What's the next jump? The panel displayed the string GSID number 3, 1795 190837. Fuck. Resuming control! I screamed to the ship to halt the automated navigation system before bolting to the cockpit and disabling the currently plotted jump. I exhaled in relief and flopped into my chair. A few minutes later and who knows, I mumbled. After several moments of relieved contemplation, I sat back up and decided to quickly submit a public caution notification for the jump I just narrowly avoided making, citing the logs I have found as the reason. I also made a mental note to later escalate this to the Subspace Network Stability Commission. To ensure I don't end up with a similar fate to those patrol ships, I set up an emergency stop subroutine to temporarily reverse our ship's latching drive field manipulation if it encounters another similar subspace anomaly. With basic precautions in place, I replotted a continuation of the route, diverting around GSID number 3, 1795 190837, but just in case I stayed in the cockpit with partial control. Knowing there would be some time before the latching drive had recharged, I remotely pulled the logs I was reading earlier to the terminal in front of me, and continued where I had left off. The following log has been appended to this chain following the ratification of the Armistice Agreement between the parties that have self-identified as the Empire and Humanity. Clause 23-4 requires all reports with any relation to prisoners of war to be declassified, collated, and made public to both parties, effective as of Imperial Date 1309-6335. Imperial Date 1309-62-10-4. 49th, approximately 1.04904 cycles of war with Sentient 39. Log. This is a bit of an alien device to me, no pun intended. I've been allowed to continue my personal log on this odd device, on the sole condition I stop referring to my captors as Sentient 39, and instead by their moniker of humans. As much as I detest augmenting our ways, I have to acknowledge their honor in the ways that they have treated us. Wait, humans? Didn't I just attend a celebration with them? I do suppose it makes sense with this being their stellar neighborhood. I shook my head and continued reading. It's been a little over approximately 1.04904 cycles since my nearly disabled ship basically floated into this behemoth's hangar. It was sitting at what I could only presume is the end of this cavernous subspace tube, like an ambush predator waiting for its prey to pass in front of it. Apparently, though, they didn't expect our arrival, and still we had no choice but to surrender. To my relief, my crew aren't being tortured, and they even have a full-time medical team looking after our injured. I've tried to remain as tight-lipped as I can about any Imperial military information, but the humans watching over me don't seem to really care, and have themselves been freely sprouting what we would certainly consider military secrets. And yet, despite this palpable difference in discipline, I can feel defeatism leeching away my pride as a lesser general. Senti. Humanity's sonic weapon that has been wearing down my crew and confounding our engineers is a damn accident. They didn't even know the source was propagating through Subspace into the latching drives of our ships until I questioned them on the topic. This sonic weapon of theirs is simply the byproduct of their interstellar transportation. They don't use the Subspace network. I mean, how could they? It doesn't yet reach their systems. Humanity has somehow found a way to produce a much more efficient, yet simultaneously unrefined variant of the bore drives we've had to commission from the galactic core. As it digs, it essentially imparts shockwaves on Subspace, which manifest as a resonance in the subspace field, hence its propagation into our ships during transit. The Empire thought, and likely still thinks, it has the advantage due to the presence of the subspace network in Imperial space, but I've been both told and shown how wrong we are in the face of humanity's bore drive. Somehow, they've managed to make it more efficient with ship size. This huge warship dwarfs my own, which is currently sitting in one of its multiple hangars. Yet it also dug the enormous tube which doomed not only a ship from my fleet, but also a handful of patrol ships, and completely by accident at that. To make matters worse, this is apparently only the third largest class of mass-produced warships capable of digging through subspace within the human military. The sheer amount of force that humanity can simply send to our worlds, without needing to restrict themselves with the subspace network, is immense. Our carefully chosen choke nodes are useless. Additionally, if they wanted to, they could convert any subspace tunnel into a death trap, much like how we ended up here, simply by bisecting the tunnel as they travel. No, I don't see the Empire coming out of this victorious. I can only hope humanity treats the rest of the Empire as they have my crew. I also hope that nobody else ever has to hear humanity's sonic weapon, as that means there is a warship heading their way. End log. Appended to the end of the chain were several images. A waveform of the subspace resonance, displayed on a primitive console. A grainy image showing the vastness of the subspace tube. The standard tunnel is simply a small hole in its wall. Just off to the side of the hole, a crumpled mess of several ships, some components, pictured mid-spark, jutting from the pile, indicating the clear recency of the crash in relation to the image. And the final image, still grainy, displaying the back of an enormous warship, almost entirely occupying the full volume of the same enormous subspace tube, with its hangar bay gaping open like an omen of death. End chain. Still processing what I had just finished reading, I realized the ship overview was indicating that the latching drive had charged again. With the automatic navigation system disabled, it was waiting for manual approval. I input my confirmation, and an orange flash of light temporarily lit up the inside of the cockpit. I navigated the ship towards the newly torn membrane, and started the faster shutdown sequence, allowing our momentum to carry us through. Once beyond the ring of shimmering orange, I engaged the latching drive. The ship began to shudder uncharacteristically before accelerating down the subspace tunnel. The shudder morphed into a now very much audible and familiar resonance that thrummed throughout the ship. I started to panic. It's the same thing I heard earlier. I wasn't imagining it. What did I do wrong? Why are they coming after us? I thought back to the celebration. Did I insult someone without realizing? There were several misunderstandings, but they seemed to be mutually acknowledged as such. Maybe there was something else the humans wanted. The treaty! I yelled in a panic. They want to change their agreement. Long ago, after a peace talk between two core sentient powers, a physical treaty was intercepted and modified. The consequences only discovered generations later, too late to be corrected. Those that had orchestrated the event were long dead, and it was too immoral to pin the reparations on their descendants. Since the time of that discovery, all treaties have been handled by third-party representatives, with minimal stake in the outcome of the treaty. The reason they hire a fast courier like us is to further reduce any potential for foul play, as it becomes impossible to pursue someone through the Subspace network that has a faster charging latching drive. But what happens when the limitations of the Subspace network no longer apply? When one of the parties that has something to gain from modifying the treaty has a logic-defying bore drive and a hell of a lot of firepower to back it up. Okay. What are our rights? What can we demand from them? Will they kill us so we don't speak out about them changing the treaty? How will they even deliver it with us dead? Hey, what's going on? My partner emerged from the corridor, bleary-eyed and clearly annoyed, having awoken from an uncompleted repose. My eyes went wide as I realized how much louder it would have been for them, their repose room so close in the ship to the latching drive. Hey! Who's going to kill us? They shouted angrily, walking over to me. The humans. They're coming for us in a great big warship that has a hyper-efficient bore drive that makes Subspace itself shudder, and they are going to take the treaty and change it to fit their desires, and they are going to kill us or silence us, and we... Calm down. Take it slowly, my partner said, taking my hand. First of all, what is causing this noise? I tightened my grip on their hand and pulled them towards the nearest console, showing the images from the end of the chain of logs. I pointed to the first image. This anomalistic interference has been increasing in amplitude every time we jump, and according to these declassified logs, it is the side effect of a human-built bore drive of unparalleled efficiency. The thrum disappeared as the ship exited the red-rimmed subspace tunnel, no longer any subspace field present to continue to propagate it. I quickly upped the impulse damper strength and re-engaged the thrusters, so the ship would come to a halt. Returning to the panel displaying the images, I pointed at the last image. This is a human warship, not even close to their biggest, and its bore drive can easily dig a tunnel of this size. I pointed at the second image. The time-increasing amplitude of this resonance implies that a human warship is approaching, and due to us currently being the courier of their most recent treaty, they have a good motive for a hostile interaction. Now, oh wise, calm one, how would you like to spend our final moments? I said, a little too snarkily considering the current situation. My partner simply pulled me into an embrace, whispering in my ear, "Final moments are pretty rare. You should have woken me earlier." I returned the hug, and they continued. "Who knows? Maybe we'll know someone from the celebration and things will work out." My partner was always more optimistic than I. Several moments passed. "You know, I actually don't know how far away the warship is. Don't get me wrong, I just enjoy being here hugging you, but maybe we should sit down." Before my partner could respond, the telltale sparkles of imminent subspace membrane catalyzation caught our eyes. The area which it encompassed was about 8 times the diameter of those of the network. Well, at least it is smaller than the one in the picture. Maybe our doom will arrive with a little less of a bang. The shimmering area burst into a flash of red light as the membrane split open, revealing an angular ship. The size of its freshly bored subspace tunnel, uncharacteristically uneven. The ship coasted out of the tunnel and began slowing, the membrane snapping shut behind it, preventing me from further studying the walls of solid subspace beyond. A crackle pierced our communication channel before a creaky voice spoke, sure to herald our end. I've got a delivery for a Mrs. Never mind. I've got a delivery with an address bound to this ship." My embrace with my partner weakened from shock. Mouth agape, I watched as their eyes lit up. "Oh, yes. I forgot I ordered something from a human subnet while we were at the celebration, they said with joy, seemingly completely forgetting the state of concern we had been in moments earlier. They held down the response button and replied to the human, "Thank you. Feel free to dock with us, and I'll send my digital signature over." "What?" I finally managed to yelp. "It was just a delivery? Just a simple delivery?" While my partner was extending the docking clamps, I went to the communication button to question the human. "I thought you were a warship coming to hunt us down. Why would you use an expensive bore drive for just a simple delivery?" After a moment, the human replied, "Oh, sorry. I always forget about the Subspace resonance. This delivery ship is a bit of an antique. Most newer models of bore drives have resolved the resonance issue, but it's an expensive upgrade. Anyway, the running cost of this one ain't that expensive either. Only about the same energy cost as traveling through the existing Subspace network on this old thing's latching drive. At the end of the day, we just pass the cost on to our consumers." I spun around and grilled my partner about the cost of their package. They just shrugged and said, "It said free shipping, no passing on costs here," before grinning and getting back to their transfer. I was left dumbfounded, so I just waited for the other two to complete the transfer, before watching the human ship re-enter subspace, disappointingly straight back into the tunnel it had come from, so I couldn't witness the bore drive in action. "So, what is it you ordered? What is it that all of this was worth?" I asked my partner expectantly. "Oh, I thought I'd order some of their so-called hot sauce. I was told that was how they made that tasty red speckled dish from the celebration." "Tasty? How can you eat that shit?" I cut myself short. This cycle had worn me down too much. Besides, this outcome meant that I had far more than just our final moments left with my partner. "You know what? I think I'm going to start my repose. Just don't go overboard with that red stuff," I said drearily, as I began the short walk to my repose room. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my partner excitedly take several large bottles of pure red poison out of the freshly delivered box.